Welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show with yours truly, Mark Wallace, your host and facilitator here with you every Monday night on intellectualradio.com and iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. I'd like for you to go to our YouTube page, please, and register at our YouTube page absolutely free at The People Show with Mark J. Wallace. And then, of course, ask that you would like and share the program with your outlets. Well, we are in the aftermath of all of the big celebrations and that of the 4th of July, which was not our celebration. I am going to be reading from the letter of Frederick Douglass, his 4th of July speech that was given in 1852. But before I go into that, I want to acknowledge the passing of the late George E. Johnson of Johnson Products Company. George Johnson was born June 12, 1927, and passed this morning and was a great pioneer here in Chicago. He was 99 years of age. His business milestones, 1954, alongside his wife, Joan, he founded Johnson Products Company in Chicago with a small loan. The company created an iconic hair brands, including Ultra Sheen and Afro Sheen. In 1971, he became the first Black-owned company to be publicly traded on the American Stock Exchange. And of course, Johnson Products was an exclusive national sponsor of the groundbreaking television dance and music show Soul Train. George Johnson founded the Independence Bank in 1964. And George Johnson made his transition today at the age of 99. And so we will certainly remember and reflect our icon, which also brings me to acknowledge that one of our other pioneers are still with us, and that is Mr. Ed Gardner, who was the founder of Soft Sheen. And Ed Gardner is still with us. And so we are glad to know that he is still with us. He's been having some health challenges, and of course, he is in his 90s as well. Ed Gardner was the founder of Soft Sheen Products on 87th Street, which I have had the opportunity to meet him on one occasion and march with him during the, I believe it was the mid 2000s, when he marched on the construction site over in Evergreen Park because they were not hiring. He passed by and did not see that there were any Black men working on a construction project. And so Ed Gardner himself is 98 years of age. So we certainly salute our pioneers who have made a great impact culturally and socially in a country, in our community, and certainly here in the city of Chicago. So we're very, very grateful for their commitments. This past weekend was the 4th of July, Saturday being the 4th of July. And of course, the 4th of July marks the anniversary of the independence of the United States of America in 1776, July 4th, 1776. July 4th, 1776. Millions of Blacks were still enslaved in this country for another 89 years. They would be enslaved, and actually 91 years, they would still be enslaved illegally in some parts of the South, Galveston, Texas, and other places where the Emancipation Proclamation notice had not reached the slaves in Galveston, Texas. And so the slave owners of the plantations continued to enslave um, Black people, actually illegally. And so there were other places around the country. So the 4th of July is not what I would certainly recognize as our day to celebrate. Now, while we celebrate the principles of that, we cannot celebrate that it has not been actualized for Black people and Black people in particular. And so there are those who would say, well, we've made a lot of progress since then. We don't have people in shackles. We don't have people enslaved as we did back then. And so shouldn't we, as Black people in this country, celebrate the 4th of July as anybody else? And I would say you recognize the 4th of July with hope that the United States would come into the full fruition of those principles. Well, tonight, and when people say that to me, that we need to get past it, and in particular, when someone of a different culture, different ethnicity, in particular from the white community, would say that, they have the luxury to take that position. We don't have, certainly I don't have the luxury of taking that position. I don't have that luxury of taking the position of, because I may have, I may have made certainly some progress in my life, or to some standards. Some would say that I've had some successes. And my view is that I remind myself of what we have been reminded of so frequently, and that our successes don't belong to us. They don't belong to us individually. Our successes that we have and our successes that we experience, we didn't get them on our own. There were plenty of people who bled and died and suffered that we will never know their names, that have paved a path for us, those of us who are living today, to enjoy what it is that we enjoy, whether you have, a job, a career that you've worked hard for. Somebody laid the foundation so that you could have access to being able to work hard for that job. And so we must remind ourselves that that we didn't do it on our own. We didn't do it on our own. And no matter how much we think that we have worked hard for what it is that we get, and no doubt, I'm not denying that we have worked hard to attain and obtain what many of us have been able to enjoy. However, it does not solely belong to us. And while I'm looking for that paper, but I don't seem to be able to locate it at this moment. However, so as people, as Black people in America, Black people wherever you are, we don't have the luxury of being able to say that we can get over it, because I certainly don't get over it, and refuse to get over it, because I don't want to ever forget the carnage of what was done to our fathers and mothers, and millions of people who were completely treated as inhumane, and certainly was recognized as a man or a woman, but never identified as a man or a woman, in the same sense that other people in this country were identified. And so when you look at the total landscape and the total construct of what it is, when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in September of 1862 by Abraham Lincoln and went into effect on January 1st at 12:01 of 1863, that you emancipated millions of people to go into a capitalistic society without any capital, and to see what we have been able to become from nothing to where we have become to this date is in and of itself remarkable. However, we don't have the luxury of getting into our fine automobiles and cars and all of the other trappings of life, thinking that we have made it and that we should ever forget. And we will forget, or we will have a total celebration, because we will never forget. But we don't have the luxury until every one of Black America is being freed to determine its own destiny in this country. And until they have eradicated the systemic disadvantages that are there, particularly to disadvantage Black people, I can't rest. And certainly I cannot look the other way and portend that it is done and that I should get beyond it. I don't think we have that luxury. I certainly don't have that luxury, and I don't see that anybody else has that luxury. Doesn't mean that you cannot be hopeful, and you ought to be hopeful. And certainly hope is that thing that drives us to continue to work, to continue to challenge systems and to challenge people, not only to challenge people who are the people who are empowered and continue those practices, but it is also incumbent upon us to stand up and have a straight back and to look these types of disadvantages square in the face, wherever it may be, and challenge it. Whatever the cost may be, we have to have that kind of courage. And I was on the phone talking to a friend of mine just before coming on the air, saying that when I reflect back on what I am getting ready to read to you tonight, there's no other guest tonight that's on. I am going to read, and I hope that I'm able to get through all of it. But I think that it is important that if you have not heard or have not read the writings and the mind of someone who escaped slavery, born in 1819, and Frederick Douglass, who was a small newspaper publisher, didn't make a lot of money, had 5 children and a wife. So he was not living a lap and life of privilege or luxury. But he had the character and the courage to look it square in the face and call it what it is. I feel disappointed and ashamed that we have more available to us today to stand and to look those challenges in the face and to challenge those challenges and to challenge those systems. And there are more of us who are not doing that. Not doing that because they don't want to buck the system or they don't want to upset the status quo. That's very cowardice to me. Very disappointing to me that we have so many people in that. And there are people who feel like they can't do it, who believe that they can't do it because they would lose their jobs, which is precisely the reason why it is important for us to stand up. Because if we are in a country that brags on being free and brags on freedom, and you are anywhere and you are not able to speak up against what you see are unfair, unequitable, disadvantage challenges under the threat of losing what you have or losing your job, then the country has not reached that level that it has portended. And so the 4th of July, in my view, is not our celebration. It is a day of reflecting. It's certainly a day of remembrance, and it's certainly a day of challenging, but it is not a celebration, in my view. And Juneteenth is a day of celebration for us, and it's a day of reflecting as well, because it is a day of reminding us of where we came from and what our foreparents came through, and the bridge of their death and suffering that you and I walk across. We have the responsibility of carrying that challenge forward and fighting for our brothers and sisters who are not being provided with the same right and privileges as every other person in this country. And as long as that exists for any of our people, we cannot rest. We don't have the luxury of flying as though we have made it. We don't have that luxury. And so today, I'm reminded of a clip that I saw that really sums up, and we hear about young people and why young Black people and young Black boys are acting out. And I think in some degree, not that we condone everything that we see going on, but Fannie Lou Hamer, I saw a clip that Fannie Lou Hamer that I had to download this clip because she puts it in context. And I want you to listen to her words. Listen to her words at the time that she was saying this. Fannie Lou Hamer was certainly one of my models that encouragers to continue to push forward. And Fannie Lou Hamer lived on a plantation all of her life, was a sharecropper, and still, at the time of her being, was jailed, whipped and jailed, and the jailers had men, Black men who were jailed at that time, to beat her till they could not beat her anymore and had and tag team on there. And she still came out and continued to stand up and organize for the right for people to be able to register to vote and to be first class citizens. When I see these types of models, I sometimes feel ashamed that I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. And then when I see other people who look like me that are not willing to speak up to make sure that they don't upset the apricot for the little bowl of beans that they happen to be privileged to getting, and that they're not willing to make the sacrifice to make sure that others who are not getting access to healthcare, access to education, access to a decent job, that they're not willing to stand up and look at wrong in the face and call it wrong. That to me is very disturbing. Here's this clip by Fannie Lou Hamer, and then we're going to go into the Frederick Douglass speech.
The flag is drenched with our blood, because you see, so many of our ancestors was killed because we have never accepted slavery. We had to live on it, but we've never wanted it. So we know that this flag is drenched with our blood. So what the young people are saying now, give us a chance to be young men, respected as a man. As we know, this country was built on the black backs of black people across this country. And if we don't have it, you ain't gonna have it either, because we gonna tear it up. That's what they saying. And people ought to understand that. I don't see why they don't understand that. They know what they've done to us. All across this country, they know what they've done to us.
Wrapped in this flag today, as though that flag is somewhat sacrosanct, and it is not sacrosanct. It is a flag that certainly is not living up to the tentacles and to the precepts and the creed that it claims. But Frederick Douglass was invited to the Corinthian Hall in Rochester, New York in 1852, and he was invited to give a speech on the 4th of July. But Frederick Douglass decided that he would not speak on the 4th of July, but that he would give his speech on the 5th of July. And his speech was an indictment on the United States, bragging about its freedoms. That was that was experiencing its or certainly bragging about its freedoms from where you can say that was 76 years, and they were bragging about the freedom of the country while still millions of people were enslaved. So for 89 years, from the so-called founding and the independence of this country in 1776, our ancestors were still enslaved. And so this is the letter, or this is the speech, not a letter, but this is the speech. And I hope that I'm able to get through all of this speech. And you'll have to pardon me because as a dyslexic person, I sometimes will transpose some of the writing. And this is Frederick Douglass's 4th of July speech on July 5th, 1852. And his words are as follows. He who could address this audience without a quailing sensation has stronger nerves than I have. I do not remember ever to have appeared as a speaker before any assembly more shrinkingly, nor with greater distrust of my ability than I do this day. A feeling has crept over me quite unfavorable to the exercise of my limited powers of speech. The task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. I know that apologies of this sort are generally considered flat and unmeaning. I trust, however, that mine will not be so considered. Should I seem at ease, my appearance would much misrepresent me. The title and the little experience I have had in addressing public meetings in country schoolhouses avails me nothing on the present occasion. The papers and placards say that I am to deliver a 4th of July oration. This certainly sounds large and out of the common way for me. It is true that I have often had the privilege to speak in this beautiful hall and to address many, and now honor me with their presence. But neither familiar faces nor the perfect gauge I think I have of the Corinthian hall seems free me from embarrassment. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are no means slight. That I am here today is to me a matter of astonishment as well as of gratitude. You will not therefore be surprised if in what I have to say I evince no elaborate preparation, no grace my speech with any high-sounding exordium, with little experience and with less learning. I have been able to throw my thoughts hastily and imperfectly together, and trusting to your patience and generous indulgence, I will proceed to lay them before you. This, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and your political freedom. This to you is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your mind back to the clay and to the act of your great deliverance, and to the signs and to the wonders associated with that act that day. The celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. 76 years, though a good old age for a man, is but a mere speck in the life of a nation. 80 years and 10 is the allotted time for individual men. But the nations number their years by thousands. According to this fact, you are even now only the beginning of your national career. Still lingering in the period of childhood, I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in thought, and hope is much needed. Under the dark clouds which lower above the horizons. The eye of the former is met with angry flashes, portending that she is still in the impressible state of her existence. May he not hope that the high lessons of wisdom, of justice, and of truth will yet give direction to her destiny. Were the nation older, the patriot's heart might be sadder, and the reformer's brow heavier. Its future might be shrouded in gloom, and the hope of its prophets go out in sorrow. There is consolation in the course of the ages. They may sometimes rise in quiet and stately majesty and and inundate the land, refreshing and fertilizing the earth with their mysterious properties. They may also rise in wrath and in fury and bear way on their angry waves. Accumulated wealth of years of toil and hardship, they, however, gradually flow back to the same old channels and flow on as serenely as ever. But while the river may not be turned aside, it may dry up and leave nothing behind but the withered branch and the unsightly rock to howl in the abyss, sweeping wind, and the sad tale of departed glory. As with rivers, so it is with nations. My fellow citizens, I shall not presume to dwell at length on the associations that cluster about this day. The simple story of it is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and the title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as the home government and England as the fatherland. This home government, you know, although a considerable distance from your home, did, in the exercise of its parental prerogatives, impose upon its colonial children such restraints, burdens, and limitations as in its mature judgment it deemed wise, right, and proper. But your fathers, who had not adopted the fashionable idea of this day, of the infallibility of a government, and the absolute character of its act, presumed to differ from the home government in respect to the wisdom and the justice of some of those burdens and restraints. They went so far in the excitement as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. I do scarcely need to say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully accords with that of your fathers. Such a declaration of agreement on my part would not be worth much to anybody. It would certainly prove nothing as to what part I might have taken. Had I lived during that great controversy of 1776, to say now that America was right and England was wrong is exceedingly easy. Everybody can say it. The dastard, not less than the noble brave, can flippantly descant on the tyranny of England towards the American colonies. It is fashionable to do so, but there was a time when to pronounce against England and in favor of the cause of the colonies tried men's soul. They who so were accounted in their day plotters of mischief, agitators and rebels, dangerous men, to side with right against the wrong, with the weak against the strong, and with the oppressed against the oppressor. Here lies the merit and the one which of all others seemed unfashionable in our day. The cause of liberty may be stabbed by the men who glory in the deeds of our fathers, but to proceed, feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government, your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and loyal manner. They conduct as holy, unexceptionable. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifference, coldness, and scorn. Yet they persevered. They were right then, and they were right men to look, not to look back. As the sheet anchors takes a firmer hold when the ship is tossed by the storm, so did the cause of your fathers grow stronger as it breasted the chilling blast of kingly displeasure. The greatest and best of British statesmen admitted its justice, and the loftiest eloquence, the British Senate came to its support. But with that blindness, which seems to be the unvarying characteristics of tyrants, since Pharaoh and his host were drowned in the Red Sea, the British government persisted, and exactions complained of that freedom. The madness of this course, we believe, is admitted now, even by England, but we fear the lessons is wholly lost on our present rulers. Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became restive under this treatment. They felt themselves the victim of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacities. With brave men, there always was a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so then, and we now, at this distance of time, regard it. The timid and the prudent, as has been intimated, of that day were of course shocked and alarmed by it. Such people lived then and have lived before and will probably ever have a place on this planet. And their course in respect to any great change, no matter how great, the good to be attained or the wrong to be redressed by it, may be calculated with as much precision as can be the course of the stars. They hate all changes, but silver, gold, and copper change of this sort, the change they are always strongly in favor. These people were called Tories, and the word Tories simply means the Conservative Party. In the days of your fathers, and the appellation probably conveyed the same idea that is meant by a more modern, though a somewhat less euphemous term, which we often find in our papers applied some of our old politicians. Their oppositions to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful, but amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it. On the second day of July, 1776, the Old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshipers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all authority and national sanctions. They did so in the form of resolution, and as would seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day, whose transparency is at all equal to this. It may refresh your minds and help my story if I read it. Resolved that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free, independent states, that they absolved, formed all allegiance to the British Crown, and they all political connections between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be dissolved. My fellow citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact, your nation's history, the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny. Pride and patriotism, not less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate and to hold it in perpetual remembrance. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. So indeed, I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on all occasions and in all places, against all foes and at whatever cost. From the round top of your ship of state, dark and threatening clouds may be seen. Heavy billows like mountains in the distance disclose to the leeward huge forms of flinty rocks. That bolt drain, that chain, that broken, all is lost. Cling to this day, cling to it and to its principles with the grasp of a storm-tossed marina to the spar at midnight. The coining into the being of a nation in any circumstances is interesting, an interesting event. But besides general considerations, there were peculiar circumstances which make the advent of this republic an event of special attractiveness. The whole scene, as I took back to it, was simply dignified and sublime. The population of the country at the time stood at the insignificant number of 3 million. The country was poor in its munitions of war. The population was weak and scattered, and the country a wilderness unsubdued. There were then no means of concert and combination, such as exists now. Neither stem nor lightning had then been reduced to an order of discipline. Innumerable other disadvantages your fathers declared for liberty and independence and triumphant. Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men too, great enough to give fame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to raise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable, and yet I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for good they did, and the principles they contend for. I will unite with you to honor their memory. They loved their country better than their own private interests. And though this is not the highest form of human excellence, all will concede that it is a rare virtue, and that when it is exhibited, it ought to be commended. Respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom it is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country in their admiration of liberty. They lost sight of all other interests. They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and their generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast in with these degenerate times. How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all the movements. How unlike the politicians of our hour. The statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away into the distant future. They seized upon eternal principles, and they set a glorious example in their defense. Mark them fully, appreciating the hardships to the encounter, firmly believing in the right of their cause, honorably inviting the scrutiny of an onlooking world, reverently appealing to the heaven to attest their sincerity, soundly comprehending the solemn responsibility they were about to assume, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them. Your fathers, the fathers of this republic, did most deliberately under the inspiration of a glorious patriotism and with a sublime faith in the great principles of justice and freedom, lay deep the cornerstone of the national superstructure, which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you. Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. Our eyes are met with demonstration of joyous enthusiasm. Banners and pennants wave exhaustingly into the breeze. The din of business, too, is hushed. Even Mammon seems to have quieted his grasp on this day. The ear-piercing fife and the stirring drum unite their essence with the ascending peal of the thousands church bells. Prayers are made, hymns are sung, and sermons are preached in honor of this day, while the quick martial tramp of great and multitudinous nation, echoed back by all the hills, valleys, and mountains of a vast continent, bespeak the occasion one of a thrilling and universal interest. a nation's jubilee. My friends and citizens, I need not enter further into the causes which led to this anniversary. Many of you understand them better than I do. You could instruct me in regards to them. That is a branch of knowledge in which you feel perhaps a much deeper interest than your speaker. The causes which led to this separation of colonies from the British Crown have never lacked for a tongue. They all have been taught in your common schools, narrated at your firesides, unfolded from your pulpits, and thundered from your legislative halls, and are as familiar to you as household words. They form a staple of your national poetry and eloquence. I remember also that as a people, Americans are remarkably familiar with all the facts which make in their own favor. This is esteemed by some as a national trait, perhaps a national weakness. It is a fact that whatever makes for wealth or for reputation of Americans and can be had cheap, we will be found by Americans. I shall not charge with slandering Americans. I shall not be charged with slandering Americans. If I say I think Americans can side of any question, may be safely left in American hands. I leave, therefore, the great deeds of your fathers to other gentlemen whose claims to have been regularly descended will be less likely to be disputed than mine. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present, heart within, and God overhead. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. To all inspiring motives, to noble deeds which can be gained from the past, we are welcome. But now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work, and you have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your idleness. Sidney Smith tells us that men seldom eulogize the wisdom and virtues of their fathers, but to excuse some folly or wickedness of their own. This is truth, not a doubtful one. There are illustrations of it near and remote, ancient and modern. It was fashionable hundreds of years ago for the children of Jacob to boast, "We have Abraham to our father," when they had long lost Abraham's faith in spirit. The people contented themselves under the shadow of Abraham's great name, while they repudiated the deeds which made his name great. Need I remind you that a similar thing is being done all over this country today? Need I tell you that the Jews are not the only people who built the tombs of the prophets and garnished the sepulchres of the righteous? Washington could not die till he had broken the chains of his slaves. Yes, his monument is built up by the price of human blood, and the traitors and the bodies and the souls of men shout, "We have Washington to our father." Alas, that it should be so. yet so it is. The evil that man do lives after them. The good is often interred with their bones. My fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in the Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offerings to the national altar and to confess and benefit and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. For who is there so cold that a nation's sympathy could not warm him? Who so obdurate and dead to the claims of gratitude that would not thankfully acknowledge such priceless benefits? Who so stolid and selfish that would not give his voice to swell the hallelujahs of a nation's jubilee? When the chains of servitude had been torn from his limbs, I am not that man. In a case like that, the dumb might eloquently speak, and the lame may leap as an hart. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight brought the life and healing to you, has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into a grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems, where in humane mockery and sacrilegious irony do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? If so, there is a parallel to your conduct, and let me warn you that it is dangerous to copy the example of a nation whose crimes, towering upon the heaven, were thrown down by the breath of the Almighty, burying the nation in irrevocable ruin. I can today take up the plaintive lament of appealed and woe-smitten people. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof, for there they carried us away captive, required of us a song, and they who wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of those songs of Zion. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget there, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose chains heavy and grievous yesterday are today rendered more intolerable by the Jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular thing would be treason, most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world. My subject then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view, standing there identified with American bondman, making his wrongs mine. I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and the conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to its past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slaves on occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call into question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery. The great sin and the shame of America, I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me, that any man, those judgments is not blinded by prejudice, or who is not at heart a slaveholder, shall not confess to be right and just. But I fancy here someone of my audience say, it is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists failed to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light? Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? That point is conceded already. Nobody doubts it. The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. The acknowledgement, and when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave, there are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia, which, if committed by a black man, no matter how ignorant he be, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being? The manhood of the slave is conceded. It is admitted in the fact that Southern statured books are covered with the enactments of forbidding under severe fines and penalties the teachings of the slave to read or to write, when you can point to any such laws in reference to the beast of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle of your hills, when the fish of the sea, and the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then will I argue with you that the slave is a man. For the present, it is enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. It is not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in the metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and the cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God, and looking hopeful for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men. Would you have me to argue that man is entitled to liberty? That he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is that a question for Republicans? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice, hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans, dividing and subdividing a discourse to show that men have a natural right to freedom, speaking of it relatively and positively, negatively and affirmatively? To do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him. What am I to argue that is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve into obedience and submission to their masters? Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employment for my time and strength than such arguments would simply. What then remains to be argued? It is that slavery is not divine, that God did not establish it, that our doctors of divinity are mistaken. There is blasphemy in the thought that in which inhumane cannot be divine. Who can reason on such proposition? They that can may, I cannot. The time for such argument has passed. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery steam of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but it is fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be aroused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty for which he is constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty, an unholy license, your national greatness, your swelling vanity, your sound of rejoicings are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass, fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin-veiled cover-up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States. At this very hour, go where you may, search where you will, roam through all the monarchies and despotisms of the old world, travel through South America, search out every abuse. And when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without rival. Take American slave trade. We are told by papers is especially prosperous just now. Ex-Senator Benton tells us that the price of men was never higher than now. He mentions the fact to show that slavery is not danger. The trade is one of the peculiarities of American institutions. It is carried on in all large towns and cities in one half of this confederacy. And millions are pocketed every year by dealers in the horrid traffic in several states. This trade is a chief source of wealth. It is called, in contradiction to the foreign slave trade, the internal slave trade. It is probably called so too, in order to divert from the horror with which the foreign slave trade is contemplated. The trade has long since been denounced by the government as piracy. It has been denounced with burning words from the high places of the nation as as an an as an execrable traffic, to arrest it, to put an end to it. This nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as the most inhumane traffic, opposed alike the laws of God and of man. The duty to extirpate and destroy, it is admitted by our doctors of divinity. In order to put an end to it, some of these last have consented that their colored brethren, normally free, should leave this country and establish themselves on the western coast of Africa. It is, however, a notable fact, that while so much execration is poured out by Americans upon those engaged in the foreign slave trade, the men engaged the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable. Behold the practical operations of this internal slave trade, American slave trade, sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what is a swine drover. I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all the southern states. They perambulate the country. They crowd the highways of the nation. They drove with droves of human stock. You will see one of the human flesh jobbers, armed with pistol, whipped, and bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market of New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly on its lots to suit purchasers. They are food for the cotton field and the deadly sugar mill. Mark the sad procession as it moves wearily along, and the inhumane wretch who drives them. Hear his savage yells and his blood chilling oaths, and he hurries on his affringed captives. There, see the old man with the locks thinned and gray. Cast one glance, if you please, upon that young mother whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun, her briny tears failing on her brow of the babe in her arms. See too that girl of 13 weeping, yes, weeping as she thinks of the mother from whom she has been born and from whom she has been torn. The drove moves tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. Suddenly, you hear a quick snap, like this discharge of a rifle. The fetters clink and the chains rattle simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with a scream that seems to have torn its way to the century of your soul. The crack saw with the babe. Her speed had faltered under the weight of her child and her chains that gashed on her shoulders, tells her move on, tells her to move on. Follow this drove to New Orleans, attend the auction, see men examine like cattle, see men examine like horses, see the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever, and never forget the deep, sad sobs that arose from the scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where under the sun you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking. Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the ruling part of the United States. I was born amid such sights and scenes. To me, the American slave trade is a terrible reality. When a child, my soul was often pierced with a sense of its horrors. I lived in Philpott Street, Fells Point, Baltimore, and have watched from the harves the slave ships in the basins anchored from the shore with their cargoes of human flesh waiting for favorable winds to waft them down the Chesapeake. There was at that time a grand slave market kept at the head of Pratt Street by Austin Waldfolk. His agents were sent into every town and county in the Marylands, announcing their arrival through the papers and on the flaming handbills, headed cash for Negroes. These men were generally well-dressed men and very captivating in their manners, ever ready to drink, to treat, and to gamble. The fate of many slaves has deepened upon the turn of a single card, and many a child has been snatched from the arms of its mother. The bargains arranged in a state of brutal drunkenness. The flesh mongers gather up their victims by dozens and drive them chained to the general depot of Baltimore. When a sufficient number have been collected here, a ship is chartered. Ladies and gentlemen, that, brothers and sisters, that was a speech that was given and riveted by Frederick Douglass. Now, you will notice at the beginning of the speech, Frederick Douglass really was methodically addressing them and showing them that the intended structure of the independence, of the Declaration of Independence, of what their fathers intended, was not lived and has not been fulfilled. And he said then, as we say today, the 4th of July is not our celebration. The 4th of July, for what the 4th of July is supposed to represent and supposed to reflect, it does not. And so Frederick Douglass, on July 5th of 1852, reminded white America of its carnage, reminded them of its desolate practices, and its inhumane practices, and that there is no rival on earth of the carnage that America has done to the slave and has done in the slave trade. So when people would like to say, and I would encourage every one of you, I would encourage every one of you to make sure that each one of your children, and that from this point forward, that you make sure that every one of your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, read the speech of Frederick Douglass of July 5th of 1852, and then go on to read some of his other friends. Now, keep in mind, this was in 1852, 76 years after the Declaration of Independence. Black people were still enslaved. He escaped slavery. He was a small publisher of a newspaper, not making a whole lot of money. But he was a man that stood up and would not be afraid. And so here is a man who is not afraid. So my question is this, and I had this conversation with one of my other brothers, but my question is this: where are those, and why aren't we doing more together to fight against and to resist and to call out the tyranny that we see happening in America today? It is certainly by definition of a different form, but it is still happening. It is happening. And in fact, you have it on steroids that are happening. Long before Donald Trump ascended to the presidency of the United States and ascended to doing the kind of openly, outwardly carnage that he is trying to invoke and to exact on the country. And the enablers of Donald Trump, members of the Congress, members of the judiciary that are working to enable Donald Trump. But my question is not about them. My question is about us. That we seem to get drunk on losing sight of our realities by all of those things that we do, whether it be partying, whether it be drinking, whether it be drugging, whatever it is that we try to absolve ourselves of the reality, not of the history. It is the reality of the day. And for those of us who do know, those of us who understand the importance of not being ignorant to our history so that we can be impactful about what's happening in our present, and then certainly solidifying a future for our children and for our people, for that matter. That becomes a question that I ask of us. So when people ask the question, well, what are you so bent out of shape about? My response is that you are not bent out of shape about these conditions, and that we are using our oppressors' model as our liberation. And therefore, we you and I, we have a responsibility. We have a serious responsibility of making certain that we do our part, and we have to sacrifice of ourselves. And sacrificing of ourselves means sacrificing of our time. We don't have the luxury. We just don't have the luxury to pretend that all is well. All will be well. But it won't be just by itself. It will be because you and I have bridged ourselves together to make things well. So I say to each of you, take a little time to do a little self-reflecting about your involvement and your courage and your character to continuing to be a voice and to be a light to challenge the status quo, to challenge all of those systems, from education to economics, to ensuring that our communities are as enriched, are as healthy in education, all the way to economics, that our public commons are protected, that for our community, as well as they are for white communities. This is not about us being anti anybody, but what we certainly are is we are not going to pretend as though what we are living is not emblematic of what our foreparents lived and experienced. Much harsher did they experience it. And every time that there were gains, every time someone fought and others fought to get gains, those that resisted and those that were of the slave mentality found ways to produce laws, to create laws as they did there in Virginia, that almost made it impossible for a black man or woman not to be jailed. And so therefore, when they talk about the end of slavery, slavery has not ended with the 14th Amendment. It has not completely ended. The Constitution in the 13th and 14th Amendment says that slavery is abolished except, and there should not be any exceptions. There should be no exception. Slavery should not exist anywhere in these United States of America, including our prison and our penal system. That is the exception for slavery. And there should not be an exception for slavery. That is something that we should make sure that is abolished in this country, period. No one should be enslaved, period. Not even people. We have a criminal penal system. If you violate the law, there are consequences. But one of those consequences should not be that you could be relegated to slavery. It's in the Constitution. And it should be repealed and amended out of the Constitution. And I would hope that you all would join us. Hope you all would join us. So I just wanted to read that, and I don't know if that's your first time hearing it, but get a copy of it and read it. Read it amongst your family, your children. Have it as a required work project. And from time to time, remind yourselves of the challenges that our foreparents and ancestors experienced and the challenges that we are faced with today. But it also should be a motivator of encouragement, because I can't stop thinking about the courage that it absolutely exhibited, that Frederick Douglass had at that time, the courage that he exemplified at that time under the risks that must have been enormous. That must have been enormous. So Frederick Douglass, when was he born? So Frederick Douglass was born in, I believe he was born in 18, let's see, I think it was 1818, Frederick Douglass was born. 1818, he was born. And he gave that speech at the Corinthian Hall, that powerful speech that he gave at Corinthian Halls. He was only 34 years of age. And we have all kinds of examples down through our history to show that those persons who fought were very young people. Fannie Lou Hamer was a young woman, a sharecropper, someone without an education, but certainly was well educated, full of courage, full of character, full of brilliance, and would not allow for her circumstances to limit her vision and her willingness and her desire to fight for the rights of others. That is what's incumbent upon you and I. Doesn't mean that we have to sit in sorrow, but we do not have the luxury of this individualistic attitude and ideology that some of us have adopted. Because some of us have experienced some matriculation in life and experienced some attainment in life, and you're able to do certain things, go certain places, enjoy certain things, take good care of your family. All of that is wonderful, and absolutely you deserve it. You've worked for it. However, it does not stop there, and you have not made it, because there are so many millions more that are not able to make it, not able to provide for themselves, not because they don't want to, but because of the systems that exist to try to suppress opportunity. And they exist by people who have the slave trade mentality and have the power, the systems of power, to manipulate policy that ultimately functions like a slave master. But those of us, when we stand up and we resist and prepare, we win. If we stand up and we resist this now, we will definitely win. Hey, I'm going to take some of your phone calls. If you want to call me, we have the line open, 951-221-8221. Want to get your thoughts. If you'd like to chime in, just give me a call, 951-221-8221. Want to tell you, I am so excited. I am so excited that this is the 31st anniversary of the founding of the Black women's, not woman, the Black Women's Expo 2026. And Intellectual Radio and the People Show will be broadcasting live all 3 days. We're going to be interviewing some of the guests that will be there, and we'll be providing you with more of those names once we have that information available. But we are going to be there. 10 by 10. DeWin is going to be there. This is going to be I believe it's going to be one of the greatest Black Women's Expo ever. This is its 31st year. Mary Green is the founder of the Black Women's Expo. And she is a very talented, brilliant woman who is put this show on for 31 years. Let's make this is our sister. This is ours. Let's make it a success. You can go to Walgreens and you can purchase tickets at Walgreens there for half price. And certainly let's make sure that let's make this Black Women's Expo one of the best expos of this year. It is always a lot of fun, and so there's going to be some fun featured there. I'm trying to, I'm trying to get Miss Mary Green to, put some other activities in place, and we are going to put some things in place. We're going to have some great panel discussion, great entertainment. We're going to be doing some voter rights panels. And we're going to have some voter strategic voting. So I'm going to be doing some discussions on strategic voting, because while it's important that we get people registered to vote, and we have to get people registered to vote and to turn out in mass, not only do we have to get them registered to vote here, but we have to get them registered to vote so that we can get them empowered to reach people all over this country, because we must take control and back out of the hands of the autocrats and those that would like to operate as though we have a monarch, and we are not a monarch. And so to neutralize this person that we have, President of the United States, to certainly neutralize him for the next 2 years that we have to have of him, there won't, in most probability, there will not be the opportunity to impeach and convict him, because you can impeach him. If the Democrats certainly take control of the House, they can impeach him. However, I think it would be pointless to impeach without the ability to convict, because the Senate is the basic trier of fact, so to speak. So the House brings about the charge, and the Senate is the trier of fact. So the trial is held in the Senate, and the Senate has to vote, and by a 2/3 majority, they have to vote in order to remove the president. That is not likely to happen. So is it going to be a good idea to impeach the president? I'm not sure that would be the most prudent thing if you cannot get a conviction. most trial lawyers don't, or prosecutors don't take cases to court if they can't get a conviction. So that would be like taking the case to court, but you can't get a conviction. So you can charge, but you can't get a conviction. And I don't really see that if the Democrats, if we take the House back, that we should expend the early political capital on bringing about a charge that you can't bring all the way home. There are other things you can do. You can open up investigations. You can certainly have hearings, but you don't have a DOJ that's going to cooperate with it. So I think you have to be able to look at what is the hand that you have and make sure that you play the best hand. Because what the Democrats certainly have to do is to speak to the country, to say to the country, this is what our plan is to try to make life better, and to make life better, to make cost, to give costs to go down, so that we can expand housing, to build more housing, so that we can make housing more affordable for those who need help, to be able to take back our systems of government, to make them work for the benefit of the common good rather than for the benefit of the audience of one. But you can't do that if you do not have the power and the control to do that. All right. So I am so excited about the Black Women's Expo. That's going to be July 31st through the 2nd at McCormick Place from 11 o'clock until 7, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I'm going to be talking about it every week on the air. We're going to be doing some special. We're going to even get Mary Green to come on the podcast, so you'll know who she is, and we'll hear from her, and she'll be able to share more of what she has planned for the Black Women's Expo of 2026, the BWE, they call it, BWE, BWE of 2026. It's going to be great, fantastic fun. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing you there doing the 3 days of the Black Women's Expo. I saw a clip of the Republicans. The Republicans, they cannot get out of their way. They certainly can't get out of the way. And then there were this person who is from Chicago, who is a Tea Party Republican, who is now saying that he has adopted the Democratic Party as his party. But I heard him on air today, and he referred to the Democratic Party, because there is no such thing as a Democrat Party. The word Democrat was that came about as a disparaging name, right? There's no such thing as a Democrat Party. It's the Democratic Party. And the word Democrat was emphasized by a Republican back then as a disparaging name. So, but the Democratic Party is what it is. It's not a Democrat Party. It is a Democratic Party. So therefore, but I heard him today, and I forget, can't remember his name. He was on MS Now, and he was referring to his party, his new party, the Democrat Party. There is no Democrat Party. It's the Democratic Party. We are Democrats, but there's no such thing as a Democrat Party. It is the Democratic Party. All right. And so the name Democrat was really the more emphasis to emphasize Democrats. And so they never wanted to give it a name or to have it to appear as anything decent. So they always wanted to take and disparage it. And I'm trying to think of the person's name. Who was it that said, don't call it a Democratic Party, but to call them Democrats? and the emphasis was um, on the rats. I it his name escapes me right now. However, that but anyway, he kept saying the Democrat. And every time I hear somebody say that, it is just a disparaging term. It's a disparaging terms, and they typically don't have any real credibility there. Um, so, but I heard him on there. But I also heard a Republican who basically revealed exactly what it is that the Republicans intend to do, and this was um, um, one of the Republican congressmen um, who got up to do a press conference.
Our
and
Republican
said,
priority will always be to be putting government ahead of Americans.
That's what their priority
Our
is. Let's see it
Republican
again.
priority will always be to be putting government ahead of Americans.
That's precisely. Now, he may have said that was a slip of the tongue, but I don't believe it's a slip of the tongue. And even if it were a slip of the tongue, it's certainly not a slip of what their common practices are, because that's precisely what they're doing, is putting not government ahead of Americans. What they are putting ahead of American is Donald Trump and his minions. That's what they're putting ahead of Americans, which is very true by their own actions. So that explains itself. That is what they're doing. So it might have been a slip of the tongue, but his slip of
Our
the tongue
Republican
was exactly.
priority.
What is
Our
this
Republican priority will always be to be putting government ahead of Americans.
Oh, that's what he said. Our Republican priority.
Our Republican priority will always be to be putting government ahead of Americans.
No, I just had to get that clip because I thought it was so funny when I heard it. Is to put government ahead of America. To put government ahead of Americans. Okay. And I thought that we were the government. I thought we were the government. But really what he means is to put Donald Trump ahead of Americans. That's really what that is saying. Absolutely what it is saying. All right. So listen, we're going to come back. If you guys are not a part of the or certainly registered, I want you to go to my YouTube page, look for The People's Show with Mark J. Wallace, and please register there. Register there, like and share with your outlets. Now, for some reason, one of my pages on Facebook, because it is saying that I posted something or something that I posted violated the rules. I don't know if it was somebody's music or something that I posted, but it doesn't explain to you what the violation is. So I'm not able to post the podcast live as a result of whatever that restriction is. But it's okay because you can see me in other ways. But please go to my YouTube channel, register there, look for Mark J. Wallace, The People's Show, or The People's Show with Mark J. Wallace, and you can register there for absolutely free. We just want to get our numbers way up in order that we can be really that we can reach people and build a real strong coalition. I think that it is so important that we build our own independent Black voting bloc. And so I started 10 by 10 to win way back in 2016 or 2017. And the reason that it's called 10 by 10 to win is because each one of us knows at least 10 people that trust you. You know 10 people who trust you. And just think about this. There is nobody who is running for a public office, whether it be the mayor whether it be an alderperson, whether it be a commissioner, whether it be a Cook County Board president, whether it be a state representative or state senator or a governor, nobody, any statewide office, you cannot win in Illinois without getting the plurality of the Black vote. Because in Chicago, there are more than 660,000 registered voters with another 150,000 that are not registered that's eligible to register the vote. And in the surrounding Cook County suburbs, we have more than 800,000. 800,000. That means that we have more than 1.5 million registered Black voters in all of Cook County. And with those kind of numbers, if we put together our own independent Black voting bloc, we would be able to do great things. That means that we could organize to challenge public policy, to have public policy passed. We will be able to organize to select our own candidates, support, and then elect our own candidates. When you have that kind of influential power, when you have those kind of numbers, you will be able to talk to a governor. You will be able to talk to a mayor. You will be able to talk to a United States senator or a state representative. They will respond to you. Republicans, politicians respond based on two things. Can they help me or can they hurt me? If they can help me, they'll respond. If they can hurt me, they'll respond. If you can do neither, you will maybe get a response. What I am saying that what we should be doing is we should develop our own independent voting bloc so that we could address the issues of concerns from education to economics with numbers. And when you have numbers, you have power to impact public policy, regardless of who might be in that particular public seat. When you have the power, and when you have the power, when you have the numbers, what does that mean? Because the numbers reflect that you have the wherewithal to vote somebody in or to vote somebody out. When you have that kind of power, you then have an open process by which you can talk to legislators, you can talk to administrators, and certainly we can talk about getting public policy passed. And public policy that we need radical public policy in order to drastically change the conditions of our neighborhoods from education all the way to economics and all of those things that are in between. So that's what real power is. Real power is not in having the biggest checkbook. That's not the power, because having the biggest checkbook, they don't go into the polls and vote. They're able to try to rally support and to pay politicians and that sort of thing to align with them. But they don't go into the polls to vote. So the biggest power is to having the biggest number of voters. That's where the real strength is. That's where real power is, that we can make a difference and we can get public policy passed and public policies change that elevate our constituents, our communities, not just a group, but our communities. That is what the Frederick Douglass reminds of. They paved the way for us to be in this moment and this opportunity. All right, that's going to do it for this week. I want to thank all of you for tuning in to this week's reading of the Frederick Douglass speech of July 5th of 1852 and at the Ladies Anti-Slavery and at the Corinthian Hall for the American Abolishment Movement. That's going to do it for me on this Monday night. Thank you all for tuning in to the People Show on intellectualradio.com, iHeartRadio, and Facebook and YouTube. Please like and share this broadcast. We'll see you next week.